Here we go. This is an HIF carburetor. It's horizontal. That means it's mounted horizontally. There were some vertical carburetors before the war. Which war, Dad? Second World War. The carburetors have changed in length. They used to be a lot longer. And then in 1963, the MGB and the midget, we went to the HS model. The first model is the H model, meaning horizontal. Then we went to the horizontal short body, HS, horizontal short body model. And then in 1972, we go to the horizontal integral float. Now, these are not my favorite carburetors because anything that goes wrong with the float, you got to take them off the car and fix them. You know? So the ones with the side float, those are a lot nicer for repairing. But these were used from 1974 through 1980 on the home models, and on our cars, 72 through 74. Then in 1975, we picked up the Stromberg. The hole on the back, the breather hole, when you open up the butterfly, this is 1 1/2 inches. That's how the carburetor is measured. So this is an HIF 4 because it's 4/8 of an inch over 1 inch. So H4. The same, it looks just the same almost, a little bit bigger, is an H6, a 1 3/4 inch carburetor was used on MGCs, not the HIF, but other cars, Volvos, so forth. So let me just show you some of the things from 1968 through 1980. There's a spring-loaded valve here, and that valve is designed so that when you're running down the road at full speed, and suddenly you want to slow down and you close the throttle. Now it's closed so tightly that not enough air gets through to get into the cylinders to combust, which means you're pumping raw fuel out of the tailpipe, and the government does not like raw fuel in the atmosphere. So they put this little valve in here, then this thing pulls open. The vacuum on this side pulls that valve open, and it slows deceleration. Now, if you want to make your sports car, your MG, snappy, so that it accelerates quickly, that's one side of it, but decelerates quickly, you can solder this shut, solder it shut. You just heat it from the button side, put some flux on it, and flow some flux into the bottom of the butterfly, or you can change the butterfly altogether. This wasn't introduced until 1968, and you can get new throttle discs and change those. So this is our carburetor. We've got a damper at the top. This is a hydraulic valve that moves back and forth when it's moved up. It seals itself when it moves down. It opens, and as a result, the air piston moves up with extreme difficulty and falls effortlessly. On top of this, we've got a suction chamber. This is held in place with a 3/16 Whitworth screw, but a 1024 works just fine. So here's our suction chamber. Okay. And then there's a spring inside. And the spring is designed to give a downward force on the air piston. Back in the days of the T-types and the Bug-Eye Sprites, these were brass. They were really heavy. They were brass. They're beautiful. But it was too expensive to continue to make. It's a whole lot cheaper to make them out of aluminum, put a spring in there to get the force. Now let me go back to the suction chamber. There's this little boss on the side of the suction chamber right there. And you always look inside to make sure that there's not a hole drilled through there. There was on an MGA 1500 and on a lot of other vehicles. In a suction chamber for an H4, HS4, HIF4, or HS6. they're all the same size and they get mixed and matched. Somebody's trying to clean one up, it falls on the ground, it bends, can't straighten them. And somebody grabs another one, you end up with a hole in here because it's an earlier model, and then the car will run rich if there's a hole in there and there's a hole in the top of the damper. So you have to have, see that little, where's the hole in the damper? Oh, is it? There it is. You can see my finger through it. You have to have one hole. You either have it in here or you have it in here. You can't have two and you can't have none. You have to have one. So the springs are they're measured by the force, but if you take your carburetors apart and match the springs and they're both the same length, they're probably okay. Probably no point in buying a new one. If one of them's been stretched out a lot, you can work with it to try to get it shorter again. But anyway, so here's our air piston. I've cleaned this out, so when I turn it upside down, the oil from the dash pot doesn't drool on my keyboard. There's a needle here, and this needle is spring loaded. You can see that. See how that's up through 1968, the needle was fixed. So that means that setting the carburetor up takes a lot more time because you got to center the jet. So they went to a spring-loaded needle in 1969, but the needle has to be biased in the correct way. So the needle is always biased toward airflow. So the airflow is like this through here because these holes on the bottom of the air piston are always at the end of the airflow on the lee side, and the needle is spring loaded. And there's a little, you can't see it. There's a little tiny mark on this barrel up in here that lets you know that you got it aligned correctly. Some of the HIFs, there's no problem at all because the barrel itself has a slit in it. This doesn't have a slit. This is just round, but there's a little nub on it. I don't know, see this stuff, but there's a nub on it that loads the needle in one direction, and that line is exactly in line with the nub. And here's a little spring on the top that you can easily lose, but look at this. It's a ballpoint pen spring, and it really doesn't make any difference as long as it spring loads the needle. Its force isn't critical. Now we can look down inside the carburetor, and we can see that there are air is flowing from the bottom to the top. Would it be easier if we make it flow from the top to the bottom? So we've got, I'm going to try to point these things out here. We've got the main jet right here, and that's sure. It's like working on a mirror. That's the main jet, okay? And then right behind the main jet is the emulsion tube, and that is for the air fuel goes into this. Come on, goes into that, and then comes out right underneath the throttle disc to give you better vaporization at idle. Off to the side, over here, is another hole, and that's the choke hole. It isn't a choke, it's a mixture control, but there's another hole there. And that's so that when you operate the choke, which of course isn't a choke, it's a mixture control, but you turn this valve, you turn it, it's hard to see me turning it, but when it turns, when the linkage is on there, and it turns, it allows gasoline to flow right from the float bowl, get sucked from the float bowl right into the airflow. And oh boy, if there's a problem there, you have an HIF that runs really rich, really rich. So the way to find out if the O-ring on the valve is okay, let me take these screws out of here, and I'm just going to show you it's hard to see this. talked to my daughter about, I said, can I get like a camera? And she said, well, you're not going to find a camera that's much better than what's in your, for focal length. That's much better than what's in my laptop here. So here's the valve, and here's some holes in the valve. You can see the hole in the valve, and then there's a hole in the front, and gasoline is able to come through this valve. And it lines up with a hole in the body. You can see that little hole in the body. So the hole in the valve is lined up right now with a hole in the body, so the choke would be on. But there's this O-ring right here. There's this O-ring right here. And this O-ring is a number 13 O-ring. And when that fails, gasoline is able to get around this and get sucked into the airstream. And, you know, you set the car all up, it's fine, you're out driving, all of a sudden it's like running really rich, and it can drive you crazy until you do this trick. And that is, you take the vent from the float bowl here on the side of the carburetor, the vent for the float bowl, and you put a piece of tubing on it, and you take the suction chamber off the top of the carburetor, and you blow into the tube that is attached to here. Don't use air pressure, just by your mouth. And the gasoline in the float bowl underneath will get pressurized by the pressure from your mouth, and you'll get a stream of gasoline that squirts out of this main jet, 2 foot high, 2 foot. I mean, it goes way up. It doesn't take much pressure at all. So now you put your finger on that main jet, put your finger on the main jet, and you blow really, really hard. You blow so hard you see stars. And if you can see gasoline burbling up from that extra hole, which lies right on top of the choke, if you can see gasoline burbling out of that little hole there, that O-ring is faulty, and it's really common to have this problem. It's a number 13, but when you have to replace it, it's got to be in Viton, so it's impervious to the modern gasoline. Okay, so let's take a look at the bottom of the carburetor, which is where lots of problems lie. I just had a guy contact me, and he said, oh, you know, my car doesn't run, you know, it idles all right, but it gets up to speed, it runs out of power, on and on and on, and HIFs, and he took the carburetors off, and someone had switched the floats left and right, which is not unheard of. As a matter of fact, today, when I was putting this carburetor together so that I could take it apart here on screen, the float that's in this carburetor right now was in the opposite carburetor, so it was installed wrong. So here's our cover underneath, and this is sealed. There's an O-ring here. Okay, here's the O-ring, and like most old O-rings, it'll, you know, it's old, it's neoprene, falls apart. All the new stuff is Viton, has to be. So here's our jet right here in the middle, and here's the float. So the jet is supported on a bimetal device here, so that when it gets warm, the jet rises, so it tends to lean out the mixture. Again, it's a mechanical attempt to make the mixture right at differing temperatures. All stuff that, you know, I mean, people now say, oh, you know, my MG doesn't idle quite right all the time. It's like, well, duh, you know, it's a carbureted car. Sometimes it's hot, sometimes it doesn't want to idle. So here's the jet, and here is this bimetal device here. And it's got the bimetal up on top, and when it gets hot, it forces the jet upwards. So these jets are supplied left and right. There are some that are just got a horn on the bottom and they're universal, but if you try to get them in the wrong carburetor, they won't fit. It's really easy. It just doesn't go. But here's a really bizarre one, and that is that the hole in the jet should be 90 thousandths for our cars. Other cars, the HIF 6s take 100 thousandths jet. And the 100 thousandths jet and this jet look exactly the same. There's no marking on them. So it turns out that the tube from most carb cleaner and stuff just fits down inside with no extra clearance. So if you got some kind of rich running problem, you can always take the end of your squirter and just put it down in here and just say, hey, is this a 90 thousandths jet or 100 thousandths jet? And 100 thousandths jet will make it run so rich. It'll run for a while till the plugs fall off. It's so rich. So here's our float on the inside. And of course, it's supposed to be like this. So every time I'm talking up and down, it looks backwards from what I'm saying, but the needle and seat is spring loaded. And when this is all set to go, when it's all set and the spring isn't collapsed much, we should be able to put a straight edge across the top of this and have the float just below the straight edge. So they call for 2 millimeters. That's about 3/32 of an inch. It's real tiny, but anyway, so the float, when you put the straight edge across here, but you have to make sure, because like on this one, the spring is so weak in the needle and seat that when I tip it all the way up, the weight of the float itself causes the needle and seat causes the spring to collapse farther. So you can't tell, but I can see this float move down into the chamber there the more I turn it because of its weight. So you have, if that's the case, then they're not very good needle and seats, but you have to check it here. So when I'm checking it here, where it's all the way closed, my straight edge does hit it. It does hit it. But up like this, it doesn't. But don't be fooled. You want to do it when it's just closed. So the hot setup, of course, is Viton tipped needle and seats. So I cannot put this jet. I can't put this float into this carburetor. But I can put the jet, or I can put the float from the other carburetor into this carburetor. And then the float doesn't have the scoop at the top, like this, doesn't have the scoop at the top. It's got this at the top. How would you know? Unless you paid attention when you took them apart, didn't take them apart both at once, didn't trust it to work that the first guy did. Whatever, it's in there, but you can get these wrong, and when they're upside down, there's just not enough gasoline in the float bowl to run you at high speed. So here's the needle and seat right here inside the carburetor, and this is an old AUD 9096, the old-fashioned SU steel on the top. Anyone who's a plumber knows that if you got a steel, well, brass, but you got a brass pin and a brass seat, all you need is the world's tiniest piece of stuff and it'll hold it open. That's the nice thing about the Viton. So that's how it all comes apart. And things to watch out for. Extra holes, checking for the choke isn't leaking. Almost everything you do to that carburetor wrong makes it run too rich, except getting the floats in wrong or having the float height grossly incorrect. Almost everything else makes it run rich. So if anyone's got a question about an HIF right now, I'll take it. Otherwise, we'll go over to the chat section.
John, can I point something out?
Yes.
Can you hold that float up again? So that's an early float. If
Yes.
you look at the beam, it's a like an X cross section. The replacement floats, that beam is a H section. So if you hold that float, you'll notice that it twists very easily. And the replacement floats are much stronger.
Okay.
So you get a more accurate float level setting.
Okay.
And
Are those are from Berlin Fuel Systems? I don't, because Joe is.
every replacement float I've ever gotten had the H beam in it.
Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah.
So
when
when I see those, I throw them away and replace them.
Okay. For $35 each. Okay. Yep.
Hey, John, real quick, going back to the date code,
Yeah.
you said this one had 7L11. Why do you?
I don't think I can get, I don't think that shows up there. It's just, it's right up. I can't see it, but I'm on gallery view anyway, but it's a set. So you need Fred Horner's date decoder. If you want his date decoder, send me a note and I'll send you his PDF of his PowerPoint presentation. It's got a lot of information about carburetors and date codes.
Yeah, I don't know what good it is knowing the date it was made, I guess. But mine is the same. It's 711J 7L11, same as what you just showed. And you said 73. I know the 7 makes sense. I didn't understand where you got the 3. That's all.
Oh, the L. The L is I'm not sure where the 7 comes from. The L means 1973. So, and they've got a couple different codes that they use between 1925 and at the end. So they were making, Fred said they were making 30,000 carburetors a week. So that's a lot. It's a lot of carburetors. Anyway, yeah, they're just stamped with a, I don't know why, but, and I don't know why Fred's all excited about doing it. But he's really into it. I mean, he's just got all these examples, and he's been, talking to Joe Curto for years and looking out at the shows and everything and writing stuff down. It's a real personal passion of his. I just have to respect him for what he's doing. It doesn't make any difference, Any other comments?
Certainly don't use it to order parts or anything for it. So
no. There's a tiny change between a 72 and a 73 and 74 carburetor. There's a tiny change. You can see that there's an emulsion tube right here at 6 o'clock. See that little dot in there on the bottom? And prior in 72 only, that was a tube that stuck up, and the throttle disc actually had a notch in it. So, I mean, when I rebuild them, I grind that notch down and just use a standard throttle disc. But so there are some little tiny, they're little tiny things. But have I got any other questions questions about the HIF carburetor? Okay. So we'll start on our chat section tonight.
Oh, John, maybe you should point out the mixture screw being backwards.
Clockwise is rich. So the mixture screw over here on the front. Let me get this thing in here. So you're looking at the carburetor like this when you're staring at it, and on the outside of each carburetor, there's this screw that comes in on an angle. and that screw comes down. You can see it poking out. Down here. And the more you screw it in, the more it moves the jet, pulls the jet away from the bridge. So clockwise is rich. And you make your first adjustments in full turns, and then half turns, and then quarter turns. I usually don't go any more detailed than just quarter turns. But it moves the jet quite a lot. 3 full turns will move it. Oh, I don't know, eighth of an inch maybe. So it's anyway, tuning is yet a whole nother deal. But clockwise is rich. Every minute that goes by, you ought to have more money in your account. Except for this past week when the market took a dump. Yowza. So, any other questions about HIFs?
Hi, John.
Yes.
Years ago, I replaced that jet with a product called a gross jet.
Yes.
I've had them in my 72 for a couple decades. They seem to work well. Do you have any opinions on those?
The original gross jets were great. Instead of a needle and seat, it's not the main jet in the carburetor. It's the needle and seat, and it's called a gross jet. And it was manufactured by the Gross Company in Massachusetts or Connecticut. And because Caroline used to write checks to Mrs. Gross, and instead of having this needle which goes up and down, it has 2 rolling.
Ron, I'm on a Zoom call. Can you?
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be in a meeting later.
Back, okay?
Yeah, tomorrow will be better unless it's really important. Okay, bye.
Sounds good. Bye.
Okay, so instead of having a pin that goes up in there and shuts off the flow, you've got a ball bearing that goes into a seat, and that ball bearing is always able to turn. It's always able to flush whatever kind of dirt that's on there off. And there's another ball bearing underneath that in turn pushes it. The problem with the newer ones is they're not made by the Gross Company anymore. Guess where they're made? And the other thing is that modern gasoline gets pretty sticky. And over a period of time, if you haven't run the car, those gross jets can stick closed. Any of the needle and seat can stick closed. The gross jets seems to be more. And if that happens, I just had a shop here in town call me, and they said, we got gasoline up to the carburetors, and the car hadn't run in 10 years, and we can't, it won't fire, and it'll run on carburetor cleaner. And I said, take a screwdriver handle, and hit the carburetor, as hard as you can. You aren't going to break it. And sometimes that'll loosen up the needle and seat, and the gasoline can then rush in there. And that's what the guy did here in town. It worked just fine, except that then it started leaking because, of course, because the O-ring in the bottom had failed. But the gross jets are just fine. I mean, if there's no point in changing them or anything. The Viton today, if you're going to buy a new needle and seat today, I would, of course, advise the Viton tip one.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure. Any others?
John, given the choice, if you were putting a carburetor on your MGB, for instance, and you had the choice between the HIF and an equivalent size HS, how would you make that choice?
The reason I have this here to show you is because I refuse to fit these on my daughter's 73 MGB GT. I put HS carburetors on it, so that's my answer.
That pretty well answers it.
I mean, I talk to people, go, oh my God, the HIFs are so great, and it's like until they leak, until they start overflowing, and then what are you going to do? You got to take the carburetor off the car. It's just so frustrating. I mean, I can get them off real fast, but it's just, it's just frustrating. So in an HS carburetor, it's easier to repair those kinds of things. On the other hand, an HS carburetor's got this tube that comes off from the bottom of the float bowl, and after a long period of time of that jet moving up and down to make it run rich for startup, that tube breaks. But that isn't usually until years and years and years have gone by. So anyway.
John, those of us who grew up with T-Series, appreciated the HS carburetors, and I never did like the ones with the tube for that very reason. I much preferred the float bowl that was physically attached to the carburetor.
Well, that's what this has, unless of course the nut comes loose on the bottom of your carburetor, and then the whole float bowl falls off. That happened to me in my MGA one time, and then the other downside of an H-type carburetor is you got those two cork seals, and unless they're always soaking in gasoline, if you let them dry out for too long, they don't seem to soak back up again, and there's always some gasoline dangling off the bottom of the jet waiting to drop on the manifold. On the other hand, I've driven cars that have been spewing gasoline, literally dripping it, spewing it, and I've never had a car catch on fire. That only happens if you're sitting still. So I guess that's my experience, just anyway, there's something to be said for each of the carburetors, the H-type and the HS and the HIF, and then the one which is not up for discussion tonight, which is the HD, horizontal diaphragm. That's a real piece of work. That's a real difficult carburetor to rebuild and get all set up and everything. Those are all bigger carburetors.
John,
Yes.
when you were showing the air cylinder with the needle valve on the bottom of it,
Yeah.
they're not particular to the carburetor that you're currently showing to us. The long needle valve, the brass, there you go. I had a Spitfire with the Stonberg Carlson carburetor on it that I had redeemed out of a field that had been sitting there a few years. And I got it to run, but I couldn't get it to idle. So I finally gave up and I took it to a shop in Allentown, and he pulled that cylinder out and walked it over to a buffing wheel, and he buffed that needle valve, stuck it back in, and he said, that'll be $50. And I said, you didn't even start it. And he said, it'll run. And I started it up and it ran like a clock. There was mold on that needle valve, just a little bit.
They can end up looking like the roof of a European cathedral, all covered in greenish deposits and everything.
Yes.
Yep. And if you take some Scotch-Brite, or so, you don't want to change the diameter is like really critical. But got to make it run. You can make it run. So use some Scotch-Brite on it and clean it, and it'll be all right. Or you can buy new needles for $30 a piece or something. So.
Well, I never forgot it because that was $50.
Well, that was $2 to do it and $48 to know what to do, right?
Yes, I paid for what he knew.
Yep.
I've got a question about the HIF4s.
Yes.
I've noticed recently, somewhat consistently, there's a little bit of a hesitation when I hit the throttle. Someone thought that the suction chamber the inside of the suction chamber may have to get cleaned, which would probably solve it. Does that hesitation sound like, is that a common problem?
It could be that. See how nice and free this is? So all you gotta do is take the suction chamber off and the spring out and the air piston off and get a can of carburetor cleaner and spray it all off and wipe it with a rag and put it back together. And then my trick is to use 90 weight gear oil in here, not 3-in-1 oil, not brake fluid. Workshop manual says engine oil, but there's a lot of wear in here. There's a lot of wear. So how do you make up for wear? Put in thicker oil. So I use 80-90 gear oil in here. Because this damper, what did I do with the damper? Oh, it's the suction chamber. This damper, again, is a one-way valve. And when the piston wants to come up, you want to restrict it from not how far it goes, because it'll get there. It's just, we're talking about getting there in half a second or getting there in 3 seconds. And the time that it takes it to climb keeps the venturi, the area below the piston, smaller than it would be normally. So the vacuum is greater. So it sucks out more gasoline. Our carburetors don't have an accelerator pump like most carburetors do. Instead, we've got this valve and this damper here to act as an accelerator pump, to enrich the mixture at acceleration. So between those two things, it'll probably take care of it. If it doesn't, call me and I'll walk you through some other stuff.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any more comments about HIF carburetors? All right, we'll get into the good stuff. Let's see. From James Patrick, John, who knew HIF temperature compensators were basted with barbecue sauce? My question, how much to tighten the spring-loaded screw on the compensator? Just until, when you're tightening up a little tiny screw like that, the torque comes over and all of a sudden the torque just goes up, and just stop when it starts to get really snug. You don't want to break that off in there. Oh my gosh. What we're talking about is this little screw here, right? And it's just got a little tiny, it's like an 832 thread on the end of it. And you don't want to snap that off. That's just a real bugger to get out when you snap them. Well, you can do it, but you gotta have a MIG welder, and it just gets more complicated now. So anyway, just until it's really snug, and even if it comes loose a little bit, I mean, even if it does, I don't know if this depression here in the carburetor will allow it to actually unscrew all the way. I don't know. Then of course the compensator is loose and they're moving around, but just be cautious about snapping it off. All right.
Well, thanks, John. I mentioned the barbecue sauce because that picture that you put on the that's it looked like barbecue sauce.
That's old gasoline. That's old gasoline. It's just, it's really, really horrid stuff. I mean, it's just, you take these things apart and it's like, oh my God, if you use them all the time, it's just fine. But once the gasoline evaporates, what's left is just goo, awful, awful goo. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Ott is asked, what dot do I use in my clutch for my MGB, my 78 MGB? And I would use dot 4. That's correct. Dot 3 and dot 4 are pretty similar. Dot 5 is silicone, so that's out unless you've made the whole change over. So anyway, dot 4 is what I use. And I think dot 4 removes paint less quickly than dot 3. I don't know what the difference is between dot 3 and dot 4, but my gut from having spilled lots of brake fluid in the last 50 years is that the dot 3 stuff acts like zip strip.
Thank you.
Is that good enough?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, all right. All right, from Judd. All right, we got a stock MGA 1600 Mark II with the original felt air cleaners. Well, the original filters are not felt, they're wire mesh, right? So you got the ribbed white felt ones?
Accordion all the way around. It's real thick felt with
No,
wire screen on the inside. And of course, the body of the air cleaner is 2 plates with expanded metal between them. Should I throw those away and get new filters or clean them, or if I get new?
you can't oil them. Had a guy oil them one time and they all but sucked into the carburetor. You can't get enough air through them if you oil them. You're supposed to oil the original ones. So I gotta hit the mute all here because I got some background noise here, but Judd, you can unmute again.
Okay.
And I don't know if you can, the original those K&Ns are just great. I mean, they're just great. But I don't know, it seems to me if those felt ones are doing okay, and if you can run at 60, 70 miles an hour, they're breathing okay. But they are going to garbage up with particulates, and the dirtier they get, the less with less ease that the air can get through there. So it's going to end up being richer, inside the carburetor, or the vacuum is going to be higher, so it's going to be richer. So you might try to wash them in soap and water and let them dry out. I don't know. I use the original ones with a wire mesh in them. And I don't think you can get those, but you can get the K&Ns. But what are those? $100 a piece?
They're real proud of them. Yeah. I mean, I can run between 70 and 80, and the car will go faster, but this driver won't.
Okay.
That's the
Well,
limit.
yeah, just wash them and find. I mean, you'll know right away whether you've made some grievous error because it ain't going to run well. So. And you can run if you're supposed to go someplace this afternoon, and the air cleaners aren't doing it, just leave them off for the afternoon and order up those K&Ns, rationalize it like that.
Okay, so like the acid test, just if it works, leave it. If it doesn't work, then do something. Okay.
I guess I'd wash them, just soap water. It's just like a filter in your vacuum, in your Dyson vacuum cleaner. It's just it's got to get a lot of dirt and crap on it. So I would think soap and water would get it out. So
Okay, great, thanks.
okie doke. All right, from Mr. Edwards, I still have cold weather starting problems. Starting fluid needed to get it going on cold days. So Mr. Edwards, unmute yourself and let's talk about this because something isn't working right. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's always been that way. It's all stock as far as I know. It's an MGA.
Okay.
And it just always starts hard. And then I do put the starting fluid in there, and I hate to do that because I worry about that stuff causing damage. Does it?
Once in a blue moon, there's some damage from it. But
Yeah.
The reason it's not starting, is the jets are not dropping far enough. Here we have this HIF carburetor, and it's got an external rotary valve to turn to allow extra gasoline to get into the airflow. But in the original carburetors, the H type and the HS, the jet itself, you got the jet on the needle. They actually drop the jet that far. Look at that, that's a half an inch. The jet drops half an inch. And if you drop it half an inch, it will start if you're in Antarctica. So you've just got to get that. So what you got to do is a two-person job. One, look down in there with a bright light and get someone to pull the choke out as far as they can pull it. And those levers come up and they pull the jet down. When the levers go up, the other end of it, pulls because it pivots. Oh, I'm like working in a mirror here. When it comes up, the other side over here, it's pulling the jet down. And if you pull those jets down half an inch, it'll start just like that every time.
I learned that trick with my TF. Pull that choke, that mixture control, clear into the back seat, if there was a back seat, and it will start every time.
So sometimes, you know, I mean, why isn't, maybe you don't know you're supposed to pull it out that far. Maybe you're afraid to, because it's like,
Well, and it's kind of stuck. That choke
Okay.
doesn't move very easy.
okay. So the choke is stuck for a couple of reasons. One, the levers might not move. So you can get underneath the bonnet and you can take a hold of the cable, the outer part of the cable, and pull on it. And I mean, they should come up, and they should come up pretty, how do you define easily? But you should be able to
I know what you mean, yeah.
pull them up. So
Okay.
if they do, then there's something up with the cable. Now, if the cable's way too long, if it's a replacement cable and there's that much extra cable sort of snaked around, you won't get it to pull out. You got to shorten up the outer sheath. But call me if you can't get this sorted out. If you got an iPhone, we can FaceTime and we can take a look. But you know, it comes out of the dash that far.
Yeah, mine's not. So there's something wrong with the cable then. That could be the first problem.
And well, or the cable or the levers are frozen, you know.
Okay, hey. There's a dog speaking to you.
Okay.
Hey, and is there any stuff by any cleaner that you can put in that you talked about the gas, you know, gumming up? Have you found any cleaners that help keep that? Because you know, I'm in Minnesota, so my car sits all winter, and then, you know, got to start now in the spring. It did start this year, but like I said, it took a lot of cranking and a lot of spray.
Some people are real keen on sea foam. I hear it over and over and over, sea foam, but my car is out sitting in my garage, and I mean, it was 49 here this morning. Of course, it doesn't get to negative 40 like it does, you know, in Northfield or someplace, but it ought to start up, and then I don't think you'll have any problem with the gas. I mean, you can try sea foam, you know, you can try that if it's needed. You can take the top of the float bowl lids right off. I mean, the float bowl lids are right there. You can just undo them, take them off, and look down inside them. If there's a bunch of garbage in there, sop it out, you know.
Okay.
Sop it out.
All right, thanks.
All right, you're welcome. Pat G. All right. Last session, you expressed your opinion on the best SUs for our cars. As you know, under acceleration, the front carb goes rich and the rear goes lean, except the wonderful HIF. How come you don't love the HIF? So why does the front carburetor go lean?
Inertia, John. So, you know, in the old days, they talked about putting 2 front float bowls on your T-type. So under acceleration, the mixture would stay the same. Think about it. Gasoline, when you accelerate, is going to
move to the back,
stay in position. So,
but the float bowl's that deep, and the fuel comes out of the bottom of it. So what's going on the top isn't going to make a lot of difference, unless you're talking about the inertia of pushing the gasoline in. But
exactly, John. That's a, you know, minute thing, but all the racers in England that race MGBs use HIFs because they corner the best.
Okay. I had a guy, Rui, from Toronto. 5-8 years ago, I was up at a MGB meet, the MGB meet maybe in Toronto area, and they had a track day, and when he went around left-hand turns or something or other, that was it. I mean, his car just didn't go, and we were able to take the float bowl apart and find out why, you know. So
anyway, yeah, Weber's used to be notorious for that. They wouldn't go around a corner either. So,
okay. Well, this is
come see, come saw.
It isn't like flying, where you fly upside down and have a total starvation. So
Yeah.
John, it was left turns, not right turns. It was left turns, definitely.
Oh,
Couldn't
Rui,
go
it's
in the
you.
left-hand
Yeah,
turn.
okay. Yep. And there was something up with it with a float in there, but I can't remember what it was. I remember I diagnosed it.
Yeah,
But,
the needle was sticking.
okay,
And you just cleaned it, you put it back together, and I was back on the track like a pro. It was like a Formula One pit stop. It was fantastic. Thank you.
I think you owe him $50.
Yeah, at least.
at least, that's why that PayPal button's on my website. Yeah, okay, right. I'll be up again this summer too, so.
Yeah, see you in June.
And the
See you
reason,
in
the reason,
2022.
Pat, the reason I don't like the HIFs is because when you do have a problem with overflowing, you gotta take them off, you know? Race cars that's a whole nother world. I mean, that's a whole nother set of rules. With race cars don't, idle at $3,000, and I mean, it's a whole nother set of rules. But for just street driving, boy, these things start to flood and you're just screwed, you know? The other ones, you can get the float bowl lid off easily. So anyway,
Well, save those HIFs. I'll trade you a set of HSs for them.
okay.
Send your daughter down to San Diego. I'll take care of it. Thanks.
She's in LA and she's got a 73 BGT. So yeah, it's got, and they're all set to go. I mean, they're all real nice. It's even got a Smith's PCV valve on it because they're early with number 5 needles, I bet. So, okay. All right, Judd, one of my favorite books is The MG Story by Joseph Wary. Yep, I've got
You
that.
mentioned the book, and I thought maybe you were going to talk about books, so that's why I threw that in.
We should do that. Let's don't do that tonight, but we'll plan on doing that, and everybody can weigh in and say a few words about their favorite MG book. The MG Story was my first MG book. My first real solid, honest girlfriend was she. I still have it inscribed to me. I don't have her, but I got the book. And yep, Joseph Wary. I also have it in French. It was translated into French. I've got it in French. I got a pretty extensive MG library, but I got that same book in French. So all right. So let's see, Ruth. Okay.
Here it is, John. Here.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yep. Well, I can run in the other room and grab mine. Matter of fact, I think I got 4 or 5 copies of it actually. But yeah. Okay. Peter, I see that. Yep. Ruth.
Yeah, it was on the books thing too. Somebody recommended these books by, I forget what her name is now, but anyway, about the Maisie Dodge series. And I thought, oh, this is rare. And then when I started reading, and she gets into her MG and she goes off, and it's a big thing in these books, her red MG. And they're all sort of just post World War I. So I'm guessing it must be a TD. But it's really fun. And she apparently, according to the prologue afterwards, she contacted somebody who was head of the MG club somewhere. I forget who it was now. I can find it. But so she'd done her research and reading some of the descriptions of somebody who was working on it when she first started driving it and telling her how to start it. And so, it's good. It's great. I was so excited. And they're very good books too.
That's cool. I've got a mystery book. We'll have to. We'll do this. We'll do this at another.
Yeah, it'd be fun, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it will. Because I've got one that sent me from New Mexico. The Body Under the Bonnet.
That sounds good.
Mystery. The focal point is an HRG, but the guy's driving an MG most of the time, and there are triumphs in it and everything else. So yeah.
It sounds fun.
See, Pat, MG Story has a lot of errors, but at one time it was the only book of its type. That's why I got it. That's why it was the first one off the block. It's laden with errors, but the next book that we'll talk next time we'll do that. Okay, Pat, I used the old dash pot springs to hold my files on their side and apart from each other in my file drawer. This doesn't look strong enough to hold file cards, but that's cool. You can put pencils in, you know, if you wanted to be so horrible, you know, keep these from running into each other.
Now I have to show you, John. See that?
Yeah.
Does a great job.
Okay. Yep, I see that. Okay, very cool. Yep, nothing like, yeah. Necessity is the mother of invention, so.
Yes.
Okay, Kurt Johnson, May 14th, 2022. SU Carburetor Guru Joe Curto tech session at Abingdon Spares in Connecticut. So Abingdon Spares has got a nice website, and I know Joe's been up there before. So May 14th, that'll be a real good time if anyone wants to go up there and learn a lot more and argue about which carburetors are better than others. But Joe is the carburetor king, the SU carburetor king. No question about that. He is the man. So yeah, and the guys at Abingdon Spares do a wonderful, wonderful job servicing their customers. And it used to be when Jerry Gogan had Abingdon Spares, it was just T-type stuff, but now they've expanded and they got if you got an MG, they have a part for you. So let's see. The plastic tube on the can of B12 also makes a good visual aid to spot worn jets in the spring-loaded carburetor. So what Pat's talking about is this hole in the jet, right in the center of the jet. Once it becomes elongated from being constantly wiped by that needle, you can sometimes put this guy down inside him and turn him and look and see if you can see a gap on one side. So that's certainly a way to tell. I would think that'd have to be a pretty gross wear to see it, but I haven't tried that myself. Neil, hi John. When the engine starts up, the oil pressure is around 45. Neil Bryden, what year and model do you have? Still with us, Neil. Neil, you got to hit your unmute button and let me know if you're here, because 45 pounds is not enough. Okay, well, let me hit this.
Hi, John.
Oh, there we go. What year and model do you have, Neil?
64B.
Oh yeah, that's in the toilet. That oil pressure is horrible. So so you want to take care of it before you get any more miles on the car and do some damage to the crank.
Yeah.
So you can try to change the oil pressure relief valve, but that isn't the problem. You can try it because it's on the outside. It's easier. You've got what kind of oil filter do you have?
It's probably around 50 when I first start up. But then as an engine warms up and I'm, sitting at a traffic light or something, it just drops.
Yeah, but it really doesn't make any difference what it is at idle, as long as when you blip the throttle, it pops right up to about 70, 75 pounds.
Okay.
So it's so what kind of oil filter do you have?
It's a spin-on. It's not the original.
Is there any chance that the spin-on is too short? I just had a guy call me today and he goes, I changed my oil in my car and he said, I don't have any oil pressure. So I drove it down the block hoping I get oil pressure again. It's like, oh God, please, you haven't got oil pressure on the gauge. You don't have oil pressure. And I said, he said, well, it's kind of a short filter. And I said, well, use a Napa 1068. That's what I encourage everybody to use because they're so available. A Napa Gold 1068. You can remember that easily because it's 2 years after the invasion.
Okay.
So anyway, you do, it's like approaching any problem. You do the easiest, cheapest, simplest stuff first. So you can change the oil filter to a whole different kind, and then you can fiddle with the oil pressure relief valve. But in the end, you'll find that that's not the problem at all. And the problem is that the rod bearings are gone. So the sump has to come off. You can do that in the car. You don't have to take the engine out of the car. You don't even have to jack the engine up, as long as you're in for a tedious job with a snake wrench, an offset wrench. And because you've got 5 bolts on the front of the engine that are just a bugger to get out. Actually, they're easier to get out than they are to get back in. And so it's a really bugger to get them back in, but you can do it. I did that on a concrete floor with Liz Tenike's MGA. Anyway, you gotta drop the pan off, and then you gotta see what size rod bearings you've got. Order up a new set of rod bearings. And tell me, I'm sorry, the year again, 65?
64.
64. So it's probably got a 3-main engine in it?
Yeah.
Okay, so you can change the center main bearing in place, lying on your back, after you've let the oil drip out of there for a day so you don't get it in your face. You can change the center main bearing. You got to buy a whole set of main bearings. You get a whole set of 5. It's frustrating to use just one out of the package, but that's all you can do. You can't change the number 1 or the number 3 main because of the way it's attached inside the engine. But that's what I would do, because the next step is taking the engine out and getting it rebuilt. And that's, I mean, right now, I don't know, that's $5-6 grand. So anything you can do is a half measure to extend the life of it, depending on how much you drive the car. But 45 pounds is really, really low.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm kind of concerned because the engine was actually rebuilt time-wise quite a few years, but mileage-wise, maybe less than 10,000 miles.
Well, anything could have happened. I mean, if you haven't been really rigorous in changing the oil before you store it every year, there's acids in the oil that can get in there and etch the bearings. Maybe it was kind of a loose fit to start with,
Okay. Okay, thanks, John.
Okie doke. Where are you from, Neil?
I live in Collingwood, Ontario.
Okay.
Thanks. I'll see you in Peterborough.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, Brad, do the bimetal strips cause more problem than they're worth? Is there a replacement? My car tends to lean out in the heat of summer, so I adjust it to run rich most all the time to compensate in case it gets hot. I don't know that there are any of these that are not bimetal. I don't know. And that's what they do when it heats up. It leans it out. HIFs have got all kinds of particular problems. So again, just what I told Neil with that oil pressure problem, you go for the easiest, cheapest, simplest stuff first. So you pressurize the fuel bowl just to make sure that the choke is non when you're adjusting it, and you're getting some kind of confusion in it. Make sure that your float height underneath is correct. Those are all things that you can do. So where are you calling from, Brad? Maybe Brad will come on. All right, Sid. Do you have an opinion on a substitute product from years ago called the Gross Jet? I've had them in my 72 and they seem to work well. Yeah, just those new Viton tipped needle and seats. Yep, we talked about that.
Yeah. Sean, if I could just substitute that question with something else.
Yeah, that's okay.
Neil's issue with oil pressure. Do oil pressure gauges or their sending units go bad? Reason I ask is mine's been pegged at 50, and I'm embarrassed to say for years. And now I'm thinking,
What year?
car runs great, but
what year and model?
72. 72.
72. So that's a mechanical oil pressure gauge. And so it's always stuck at 50, whether car's on or off, or it only goes up to 50.
It's pegged at 50, doesn't budge up or down.
Even when the car's off?
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's a mechanical gauge. That I just talked to this guy today who called me about no oil pressure. And I said, the rule is oil pressures never go bad. Oil pressure gauges, they never go bad. There's exceptions to every rule, but it's a pretty heavy never goes bad, but it sounds like you've got a bad one. There's something caught on the inside of it mechanically that is jammed up the needle, and getting that oil pressure gauge out of your dash is like all but impossible. You got to take the steering column out, and then you got to have flexibility and little fingers. I can do it. I'm 73, you know, I weigh 220 and my hands are massive, but I know what I'm doing. But it was a bitch. It's just horrible. It's horrible up underneath. I mean, I did. I had to take the guy's steering column out, and then you're working up inside this framework that holds the steering wheel in place, even though the steering wheel's out. It's just the framework that holds it. It's a real problem. 68 through 71, the electric oil pressure gauges, none of those work correctly. Those are all awful. And the hot setup is to change. If you ever are working on a 68 through 70, if you ever have the opportunity to have steering column out, the dash out, anything like that, oh my gosh, change that oil pressure gauge to a 72 through 76 gauge. But you got to have an oil pressure gauge that reads correctly. You just, I mean, some cars just have lights, but by the time the light's on, the engine's scrappy. So I'd use an extra gauge. Just buy some extra gauge in the meantime.
And there's no unit down on the block or somewhere that could fail. That'd be a lot easier to get to.
No. No.
Okay.
You can
Thank
talk to, you know, if you got an iPhone and you've got an iPhone, you can FaceTime me tomorrow. I'm happy to, or whenever that works out. I'm happy to work with you and see if we can, you know, I'll watch the gauges, just start up the car and we'll look underneath the bonnet and stuff like that. But
Great, thanks. I'll definitely take you up on that at some point.
Righty.
Thanks again.
Gloria takes it. She took the
Tachometer
and a speedometer out, and the oil gauge was easier to get to.
and I whined a lot.
And yeah, she whined while she did it.
Yeah, well, how big are your hands, Gloria?
Much smaller than yours.
Look at how big mine are.
Yeah, I think I thought about dropping the column. Yeah,
Well,
but I was able to do it with a lot of whining.
It's just access. So it's like taking the sump off of an engine. You know, it's easier if you jack the engine up, but that means you got to take the engine mounts off, and then what? Put shims underneath and by the time you're getting those bolts all off and all the stuff that goes with that, it's just easier to lie underneath there and take your time and very carefully it's ease and time. Those are the two questions. So you Pat, you like my screwdriver? This got a metal end on it, so you can pound on it, and it doesn't break up.
I still have some, but
Okay.
John, I want to turn you on to the best screwdriver known to man. This is a gunsmithing screwdriver.
Okay.
And look at the tip. It's not tapered, it's parallel.
Yeah, that's real nice.
It fits those cheesehead British screws. You'll never use a different screwdriver on carburetors, and they're cheap. Forster Bonanza.
Okay,
Gunsmithing, Midway, USA,
all right.
cheap.
So Pat's talking about the screw that holds the suction chamber on, at least in one application. And that's a cheese head screw because the top, I guess, because the top of the screw looks like a little tiny wheel of cheese to a mouse or something. Now this is actually a Philister head. This is a round head. It's got a little bit of an oval shape to it, and it's not original for an SU, but some of the rebuilders use these because you can buy them by the thousands, you know, for pretty cheap, and they look absolutely beautiful and they're nice, and you put them in, and who's going to see, you know, very few people, and who's going to care? Fewer, you know. So, but the screws that go on the bottom of the float bowl on an HIF, these are pan head slotted 1032s. So, but they're, you know, all this stuff is particular. Anyway, I'm off on that. Yep. Yeah, this is actually is this a proto? No, it isn't proto because it would have the name stamped on it if it was. This is a generic one, I think, probably a knockoff, but it's really, I like the feel of the wood. All right, Janet and Reg, does the jet needle go all the way up into the chamber, or does it have a ridge? The ridge gives a measure point, as on my MGA. So we've got a question about fitting the needle in, and just like an MGA or an HS carburetor, H-type or an HIF, you can put this needle in all different heights, but the shoulder of the needle, if I can show the shoulder of the needle, which you can't see, but it's where it suddenly jumps up to 125 thousandths, up to eighth of an inch. That shoulder on this car should be flush with the bottom of the carburetor. Should be flush with the bottom of the carburetor. There's a lot of information written about this. So you have to adjust this up or down, and then finally when you find the spot that you want it to be in, then you go ahead and tighten the screw. So yes, there is a ridge, and that ridge is critical. Yes, absolutely.
Well, thanks, John. On my MGA, it just ran rich like crazy when it was pushed all the way up.
I bet. That's the same as dropping the jet in eighth of an inch or something. So yeah, sure.
Thanks very much.
Okay, Mr. Cunningham. Michael says the 90 weight oil trick made a huge difference in my midget 1500. So any oil is better than no oil, and 90 weight's better than engine oil. Some people, Volvos, Volvos, they ask you to put ATF, automatic transmission fluid, in the dash pot. But maybe in Sweden it's colder all the time. I don't know. But I know that, and I got a big discussion one time with Laurie Alexander. He made the Moss Motors How to Rebuild Your SU Carburetor tape back in the days of VHS. It's been converted to, I don't know, what do you buy it on now, a DVD or a stick? But yeah, he and I had a big discussion about that because it's the workshop manual says engine oil, but you've got this brass valve here, and the brass valve ends up with dirt embedded in it. And then it's running up and down. This piston's running up and down, so that dirt on here abrates the inside diameter of the suction of the dash pot. So if you got more clearance, what do? That's the old trick when you got bad oil pressure in your engine. You jump out, go to straight 50. Add Paul Harvey's Motor Honey. Hey, what? Nobody even advertises that stuff anymore. Casite motor, honey? I just thought of that. That's, but modern engines run on 0.5 oil. That's why that stuff's about 600. That stuff's really, really stiff. Okay, James Grady. On my 66 Sprite, I'm using 20W50 in the transmission. Is this correct, as you say, with the dash bots, or should it be 90 weight? In the Sprite, it does call for using motor oil in the gearbox. We like to use 90 weight because it just shut them up. A lot of those gearboxes are real noisy, and it silences them up, and the 90 weight's okay in there. But in the dash pots, yeah, 90 weight. So in all of our cars, the rack and pinion takes 90 weight, 80-90. The differential takes 80-90. It used to be called hypoid gear oil. Now it's called Gear Lube, GL4 or GL5. If you can find GL4, use that. If you know, any oil is better than no oil. Supposedly there's something in GL5 that eats away at brass. I don't know if that's really an issue or not. I mean, I don't know. First of all, I don't know if it's true, and secondly, if it is true, does it make a difference? I mean, how much of this piston are you going to eat up? You know, a millionth of an inch in a year, then it probably is of no consequence. You know, a thousandth of an inch in a season, yeah, that's an issue. But I doubt it's like that. Anyway, use GL4 if you can find it. So use that in the rack and pinion, the differential, in the T-types and the midget 1500s in the gearbox for sure, usually in the 1275 gearboxes, but all the MGB and MGA gearboxes take engine oil. So. Bob, to everybody. Okay. 2 questions. I've got a Weber, so not relevant. Bouncy oil pressure gauge at steady speed with a Wix filter. So that means that you're running along and the oil pressure gauge is just doing that. It's just a hoot to watch it. And you're going, what is going on? Well, the oil pressure relief valve is closed, so the oil pressure rises. The oil pressure relief valve opens, so it falls. The oil pressure relief valve is closed, so it rises. The oil pressure relief valve opens, so it closes. Usually you see it bouncing down around idle. So it probably isn't an issue, but when the time comes, change the oil pressure relief valve and spring. The spring, and it's taking it out of the engine. It's in the bottom left rear of the engine. It's easy schmeezy to get out. You just unscrew this big inch nut and it pops right out. And you can either stick your finger in there, or you can spin the engine over to the starter motor, and the valve will pop out, or you can put a piece of hose in there and grab the valve and pull it out. But when you go to put it back in, you only have the strength of your wrist to depress that spring, and putting that spring in there is just a real bugger. You just have to get the rotational alignment correct on the nut, so that when you go to start it, you're not fumbling for the start point. You know exactly where it starts, and then muster up all the energy and all the strength you possibly can in your wrist, press that thing in there and turn it 30th of a turn, and it'll catch. Give your hand a rest for a second, and then you can walk it in the rest of the way. The new valves come without a shim. There's supposed to be a shim down inside there. So if you use a new valve and a spring without the shim, then your oil pressure may be lower than it was before. We always put 2 shims in, jack it up, so you get about 75 pounds of oil pressure.
Well, let me back up here.
Yeah.
I had not seen this at all. And then just recently, we pulled the dash out of the car for several months. I had the car restored and repainted, and pulled the dash out of it for a while, waiting on a windshield. And when I put it back in, that's when I noticed that. Now, do I need to bleed that valve at all? Maybe I have air in there because it was apart for, the gauge was disconnected for 3 or 4 months.
Well, you'll never get on the back of that gauge to get that nut off, to bleed
Okay.
it. And it's surprising because you take that nut off and you start the car up and you go, how come there's no oil coming out of there? And then after a couple of seconds, you get a drip. Then you wait 10, 20 seconds and another drip comes out.
I see.
Capillary tube. Not much oil goes through there. If you leave the nut loose, then eventually your pants get oil soaked because it does drip. But no, it's not purging the air out of there that's the problem.
Okay. So I bought the car with 11,000 miles on it. It's got 179,000 on it now. I rebuilt the motor about 50,000 miles ago. Got rid of all the smog crap. It's a 75B. Put a 67 head, bigger cam, Weber, all that kind of junk. Had the distributor recurved in it and so forth. And so as far as the relief valve, is it time to just replace that?
It is. What kind of exhaust do you have?
I run a header on there with a Pierce intake,
Okay.
and I've got an ANSA exhaust system just straight through to the back.
Oh my gosh.
Actually, I bought the last ANSA that was in the country about 3 years ago.
I was talking to one of the guys out at Moss, and I said, how come you don't have ANSA exhausts anymore? And they said, because they're $600 a muffler, and there's no point in putting it in the catalog, because at that price, our customers aren't going to buy it. So yeah, those are really, really nice sound on those.
Yeah, I bought it actually from ANSA, and I paid about $275 for it, and it actually came with a resonator, which I eliminated. I just ran the pipe straight back from the engine all the way to the end. So yeah, it sounds awesome, but yeah, the guy did tell me, he said, this is the last ANSA in the country. So I said, okay.
So when you take that oil pressure relief valve out, it doesn't matter where the exhaust is, you can get it out because it just pops out, right?
Okay.
But the problem is you've got this 3-inch long spring, 3.00 inches long. And there's a lot of force there. And especially if you put two, rather than buy the shims, and you look in the Moss catalog, you can see the shims in there, but we just take 1/4-inch lock washers and twist them straight. Just take the helix out of them, and that's as thick as the shims are. And just use those, and they'll hold those all in place with grease. And then you have your spring in one hand and you're lying underneath the car with that cap nut on it, and you turn the cap nut until it starts, and then you take it off, you put it in, it starts, take your hand off. So you do that a dozen times, so you know exactly where, without taking it out of your hand or anything, you know exactly where that thing starts, where it catches the thread, exactly where your hand is rotated. And then slide the spring in and take all the strength you've got in your hand and push it in and turn it and hope that the thread catches. Because you just can't keep walking at it. It's the pressure there is way, way, way too much for your wrist. Some people say, well, I'll just use a screwdriver on the exhaust, and the thing ends up on an angle, and it's a terror to do. You just got to get yourself in the right mindset and practice where it catches. It's a real coarse, what's that? It's a 1/2-inch BSF. It's about 12 threads per inch or something. It's really, really coarse.
So the 1/4-inch lock washers, how many do you recommend? Just one or two?
Two. One inside the valve, which is where the shim is supposed to be anyway, and one inside that cap nut.
Okay. One inside the valve, one in the nut.
Yep.
Okay, I'm writing in my hand because I don't have any paper, but I'll transfer that later. The other thing I have was lever shocks. What do you recommend as far as oil viscosity? Do you recommend changing the relief valve or the bleed valve or anything on that?
We used to sometimes when we'd get a car that had been off the road for a long time, you take the shocks off and you very, very carefully take the plate off the back and take the valve out, and then you'd flush it flush it and blow it out, just get the crap out of there. It stinks. Oh my gosh, it stinks so bad. And then we had special oil made up for us, 50 weight, because it's a hydraulic oil with a seal sweller and an anti-foaming agent. When it was sold by Castrol as shock all, it was 20 weight. But again, you know, the cars are older, and the compression, the rebound stroke uses in the shock, the rebound stroke uses a rubber cup, I think. But which way is it? I think the compression stroke uses it's got piston rings, and of course there's wear inside the shock. It's an aluminum cylinder, and it's a steel piston, and you put that stiffer stuff in there. Lucas makes some hydraulic oil. It's like Case Height Oil Honey, or what was it, STP. Remember those two products? You just don't see those much anymore, if at all. But Lucas oil makes a hydraulic oil thickener. And you can squeeze some of that in, you know, just squeeze it in through the filler. And that'll mix with the oil that's in there and give you a little stiffer shock.
So what, okay, if I take these off and drain the oil, what do you recommend?
But you can't use that stiffener stuff.
I've seen things where they're using motorcycle fork oil.
Yeah, that's it, but that's 20 weight, I think.
Okay.
See if it's available thicker, you know.
Okay, yeah, it is. I was in the motorcycle business 10 years,
Okay.
so yeah,
Right.
yeah, you can get thicker.
Okay.
So
And then
you're saying go as thick as I can?
Well, up to 50 weight.
Up to 50, okay.
And I mean, if you got the shock on the tabletop and you're holding it with one hand, you should be able to get the rebound stroke, pushing it down. You should be able to move it. I mean, it might take 10 seconds to move it through the stroke. And of course, the compression stroke coming up is a lot stiffer. But as long as it moves, I mean, if you put it all together and you can barely move it, it's like, dude, you know, you're not gonna be happy driving in the car because the whole car's
Right.
gonna shake, you know.
Right. What type of oil, what weight of oil did they use in that originally?
20.
Let's say I bought they used a 20. Okay, but you're saying
we bought the last cases and cases of shock oil available from our local Castrol distributor. And when we got down to the end, what am I going to do? And I had a customer in Ohio who had an oil company. So I sent down a couple of cans. I said, hey, analyze this stuff and make it for me. And so they did that, and they jacked it up. I told them I wanted it thicker, so they jacked it up to 50 weight. So,
okay. So if I use any type of 50 weight motorcycle fork oil, it should be okay, right? Okay. Do I need to replace the relief valve or whatever? I know everybody wants to go to Moss and do all that.
Well, you can do that, but if you put thicker oil in it, it has the same effect.
Right. Okay. Right. I feel like Moss
there is something to be said for keeping the car pretty original, because it was all designed by, I always say that the cars are designed by people that were paid more than I was ever, and it's all designed as a unit. I mean, you can go and get the real stiff rubber or plastic A-arm bushings and all this kind of stuff, and then you end up with a rougher ride. Is that what you want? Okay, but it's
I just want to keep my springs from destroying themselves.
They won't vibrate. I got good shocks on my MGA, but I had bent wheels, and the steering wheel would always wiggle. I mean, I couldn't drive it over 70, and the wheel would just shake too much. And I was rebuilding the engine, and I had the sump off, so I could hone the cylinders and put in new piston rings and new bearings and everything. And all of a sudden I noticed that the left front coil spring is broken. down towards the bottom, but I pulled those out and got new springs. Since then, I've had the wheels re-rimmed, and now it's like driving on glass. Oh my God.
Those are spoke rims.
No, steel. And no, I couldn't find anybody to straighten them. It just, back in 1960, there were all kinds of people that would straighten steel wheels, but now people say, oh, it isn't worth it, just buy a new one. We'll straighten aluminum ones because those are so expensive. They said, well, dude, I've got a Deluxe MGA, it's got twin cam wheels on it. And that even an MGB row style, I mean, you can't buy new rims. So I found a place in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I got to say their name, Diamond Wheel. Guy's got a $250,000 foot building or something. It's huge. And they take great big rolls of steel and make wheels out of them for racers and stuff. But he re-rimmed my five wheels. It cost me around $1,000, I guess, a couple $100 a wheel. And it's just, oh my gosh, they're straight. Finally, they're straight. And they look just like the original wheels. And they got the safety lip on them now. MGA rims didn't have the safety lip on them. So it was a real deal.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Brian Stevens. I overfilled my oil by a quart. How critical is it to remove the extra oil?
Good time, Jeff.
Thanks, John. How critical is it?
Well, if there's enough oil in there that the crane comes around and hits it, then it aerates it, and you get aerated oil. So the easiest way to get rid of it, what year and model do you have, Brian?
It's a 64B.
Okay, so you've got that flexible line that comes off the back of the engine up to an intermediate fitting that then goes to the capillary tube that goes up to the oil pressure gauge.
Right.
It's over on just above the passenger left knee, but in the engine bay, in the firewall. If you unscrew that and put it into a bottle or a can or something or other, and just start the car up and drain off, 3/4 of a quart or something, you'll be just fine. That's the easiest way to get the oil out of there without making a big mess.
Appreciate it, John.
Okay, where are you from, Brian?
I'm in Vermont, Jericho, Vermont.
Okay. Oh my gosh, we got a note here from Rodolfo. Are you still on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Wonderful, wonderful. From Monterrey, Mexico. Hey, great.
Hello, everybody.
Oh my gosh, nice to see you again. We missed you the last, 6 months or so. Okay.
Sorry.
So Rodolfo says, I'm prepping my 65B for the very first event in Mexico, in a fancy one. I'm competing in 2 or 3 categories. It's not an MG event. Let's see how the judges are able to judge me, because they don't know a lot about MGs. If it's shiny, they'll love it.
It's right here.
Yeah, it looks beautiful.
I hope I'm fixing some things. I'm buying still like the King Dick Jack original one. I didn't have it. I already bought one. I don't know. I think I'm going to restore it. I'm going to repaint it and completing just some details. And I hope I have a good start in these events.
Hey, very, very cool. Is that in Monterrey?
Yes, it's here in Monterrey, in Mexico.
Okay. Well, what kind of cars are there? What would we think of? Like just older American cars mostly, or is there a lot of foreign stuff? Or?
There is a lot of foreign stuff. On the list, I saw some the Tomasos. I saw some big league cars. I'm with my humble MG, but whatever. I'm enjoying the experience, and I tried to do a good restoring process with my MGB. It's a 65, so I'm going to show you in here the original one I bought. and how it's now. This is now my MGB, and let me show you how I got it.
Oh my gosh.
Like that. Yeah, I bought that in Texas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Very, very cool. Very cool. So how soon is this show?
It's also on May 14 and 15.
Okay, well, our next seminar here, let me look on my calendar and see when our next seminar is. Let's see, our next seminar will be the 16th. If I stay true to my word, sometimes I bump it, but by then you should be able to come on back on and tell us how you're how you did. So
At least I'm going to have some fun, and I'm going to see a really cool car. So that's everything to enjoy. And I'll tell you how is it going that weekend.
excellent. I talked to so many people who have, they'll have an MG and they'll go to some street rod show or something. So you got these people that dumped, well, you can put a lot of money into an MG too, I know, but these grandiose American muscle cars and all kinds of chrome and all this kind of stuff. And the people are all looking at the MG because it's so different, from what they're usually looking at. So, well, good luck. Good luck to you.
Thank you very much. Nice to see you again, everybody.
Hey. Pat G, Moss MGA catalog has a good info on adjusting the choke and adjusting the slop out of the linkage. Yep. Thanks. We're going to have to get that working first. Yep. Let's see, Tom, to everybody, can a fuel filter be placed between the gas tank and a fuel pump on a TD? Yes, absolutely. And it's an excellent thing to do. Tom, are you still on? We're down to 100. We're just pushing up against.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. All right. So are you all geeked about originality, or will it kill you to cut that line right underneath the fuel pump and take 3 inches?
I've already got a rubber line going from the metal pipe going to the gas tank.
Hey, okay. Well, I would propose putting it up underneath the bonnet, because if it's underneath at the back, you got to have a valve, because you can't take it apart unless the gas tank's empty, unless you want to get gasoline to run up into your underarm. You've been there, I bet. So yeah, I mean that's some people, if you're really geeked about originality, you have 2 fuel lines that go from the pump to the rear carburetor, and you got one for the show, and you got one for driving. You got one for driving that's just an old hose with some tubing on it and a real nice filter in it.
I'm concerned because I had the gas tank cleaned out, but I really don't trust it. I'm afraid there's some material in it.
Okay, all right. So you know how a better wine bottle is made, right? With the section around the bottom to catch the silt.
Sure.
Okay, so in your gas tank, you've got the outlet for the gas tank right in the center, and then the drain is off to the right side there. You take that fitting out of the center of the tank that's got the gauze filter on top of it.
Yeah.
You cut that gauze filter off. You put a couple inches of copper pipe on that, sweat solder it to the fitting, put the gauze on top. Sweat soldering the gauze is a real trick. Oh my gosh. All of a sudden, the whole thing's filled with solder,
Okay.
And then you're that far up above the bottom of the tank. And so
Sure.
all that rust and swill and crap floats around at the bottom of the tank, but it doesn't get down there. What's that, Pat? Gee, you've got all kinds of stuff you're showing me here. What's this? Oh, from Doug Pelton.
This is from Doug Pelton, and this is his replacement pickup screen for the pickup in the T-Series cars.
Oh.
And I haven't installed it yet, but he says it's a simple push-on operation. But it comes with a piece of shim stock, so I may end up soldering it on.
Okay, but that's just a normal one, but I'm talking about getting it up higher so that all that crap stays down below the screen.
And it looks like Doug's replacement does that, but
Okay.
only, I would say, about a half an inch.
Okay.
And John, I had lots and lots of experiences. I put on the that Moss chrome or I don't forget what they call it anyway, solid metal filter in front of the fuel pump. Just I wanted to filter, and I didn't object to the bling. What exactly were you talking about? The tube comes down, cut, and put it on with hose, and it does the job. It does the job so good that you will come to a complete stop if your fuel tank is full of crap, like mine was. And so I recommend very strongly putting it where it is convenient, because I don't want to tell you how many times it feels like somebody turned the key off and roll off to the side of the road, unhook the thing. That's why it's nice to have it on a rubber tube with hose clamps. You can take it off real easy, unscrew it, blow that thing. It's got a very nice filter in it. Blow it out, and you're good to go for another 500 miles. But if your gas tank is as cruddy as mine was, you definitely need that.
Yeah, and it's nice to see the dirt in the filter if you have a clear plastic one to tell how full it's getting.
Gosh. Don't ever get a solid filter. Why would you do that? It's like
I shouldn't have. I just got it because Moss advertised it, and it looked like neat bling, and I may throw it away.
Yeah, I'm all for see-through filters, so you know what the world's going on. Now there's a new. I've just been exposed to a new way of cleaning the gas tank and getting the rust out of it. You can do it on the car, and that's electroplating the rust out. All you need is a low voltage source, 6 volts. And you can leave it right in place. I don't know what you put into it, baking soda and water or something or other. Put an anode in there, and then of course all this crap's floating around in there, and you gotta continue to wash the thing out with a garden hose and bounce it around and spray in there or something or other. But that can get a whole lot of the flaky stuff off the outside. On the other hand, if it's really bad, you can end up perforating it. And then there's another set of problems. So
Thank you so much.
Hey, you're very welcome. Don,
is there a danger of the electricity from the electrodes starting a spark? I mean, could that happen?
Not if the tank is full of water.
That'll do it every time. Sorry about that. I didn't understand.
That's okay. That's all right. I had, I mean, gas tanks are bombs, and a rusty gas tank, actually the gasoline becomes part of the rust, and when you heat it up, the gasoline is freed and then goes into vapor and can blow up. So I've had a gas tank blow up on me before. Not bad, just an MGB when I got a flame 3 foot out of the filler neck. That cured me of ever wanting to solder up a gas tank again. And then that was a long time ago. And I had a kid working for me, and we had an MGA in, and the gas tank had been coated with tar, and it was a nice looking A, and we wanted to make everything look good. So I filled the tank with water and gave him a torch and a scraper. And I said, just heat up this tar and scrape all that tar off there, heat it up, don't just keep it full of water. I don't know what he was thinking. I was up in the front of the shop and I hear this giant call, whoa! And I went back in the shop, and here's a 12-gallon MGA gas tank, which now will hold about 25 gallons. The thing had just gone into a barrel. Fortunately, nobody was hurt. But if it's full of water, it won't do that. He had turned it upside down and let the water glug out. I said, what are you doing? Could have killed yourself. What would I have told your mom? Jeez. Anyway.
There was a bunch of guys up by in the next town from me that in a garage, and they were doing something on the gas tank, and they lost the building, and they had about 5 cars in there they were working on. The thing blew, and the whole building was gone.
No, it's better to let somebody know who knows what they're doing before before you start working with a torch in the gas tank. Yep, for sure. So Don Bueller says, Don. Okay, here we get a long one here from Tony Wertel. I'm looking to confirm an unfused circuits on a 78B. Tony, are you still on? Have you waited long enough to see if we've come around to your question?
Hi, everybody. Hi, John. I am.
Okay, all right. Okay, here, I'm just going to read this. I'm looking to confirm unfused circuits on a 78B. There is a white wire, no stripe, just ahead of the washer reservoir. Okay, that runs to the fuel pump. The headlights, there's no fusing on those. Let's see. So anyway, this is on a 78 MGB. There are 2 big circuits that are unfused. One is the ignition circuit. And I just experience is that there's never a problem with that. It just never burns up. With this exception, 77 through 80 has a switch on the brake box called the TCSA switch, the Transmission Controlled Spark Advance. So there's an unfused wire that goes all the way from the key switch through the mating of the main loom and the rear loom and then into the gearbox loom. It's a white. Sometimes it's a white with brown. Sometimes it's in the gearbox loom. Sometimes it's sheathed in black. And that goes down by itself to the gearbox, where it goes through a couple of connectors where it can and sometimes does chafe and dead short and burns up the wiring loom. Burns up with the whole white circuit. Is just craziness. If you got overdrive, you have to keep that wire there. So then you cut into that wire where it leaves the main loom and goes down to the gearbox and put an inline fuse in there. If you don't have overdrive, you separate that wire that goes to the gearbox, because you don't need the TCSA switch working anyway, because the emission stuff is probably off your car.
Yes, it is.
Okay, then the second thing is the parking light circuit is fused. 2 fuses, top of the fuse box, that separates it left and right, or sometimes on a cross. So when you lose your parking light on one corner, you don't lose all of them, where it makes it dangerous. But I tell you, there's hardly ever a problem with the blue circuit, blue with white, blue with red, or just straight blue. It just doesn't burn up. Now, if you want to fuse it, hey, put the fuse someplace handy, just like we were talking about, putting a fuel filter someplace handy. Don't put it way underneath the dash where you can't reach it. Extend some wires out. I mean, the headlamp switch is right there. That comes down through the column cover. So just extend those wires out and put an inline fuse that's like really handy right there. But you can make a case that you should not fuse the blue circuit, because then you're going to lose not only your brights but your dims. So fuse fuse the blue with white and the blue with red separately. The easiest place to fuse those is up at the front of the car. Yep. And because where else are you going to have a problem? I mean, somebody isn't going to perforate the wiring loom. It's going to be up front where something chafes or something. But those just don't end up having a problem. When I did my daughter's car, I put relays on the headlights. That's nice, because then you don't have all that current going through the headlamp switch. She had a 73 with rocker switches, and that's a lot of current in I think I didn't put LEDs in it. I put halogens in there, but there's still a lot of current going through that switch. So we put relays up front and I put fuses on those. I did individual circuits. So.
Great. I did replace the headlights with LEDs in H4 units because there's so much less current. I just wanted to protect the headlight switch. I know that's a weakness because the parts now aren't that great. So I'm trying to protect it where I can.
Yep.
Terrific.
But everything else is fused. I mean, there aren't many fuses. It's not like a Japanese car. You got fuses on top of fuses or relays, running relays. You know, there's just everything that works goes through the fuses there, except for the ignition circuit and the headlamp circuit. That's it.
Terrific. Like I said, when I was in the path of finding this car last year, I seen two where the owners were in some kind of really deep doo-doo with unfused circuit stuff going wrong, and those were cars that I didn't look at.
Yeah, it's so sad when you see one that's had a a problem, and then you open up the bonnet and here's all this, like commercial grade wiring with wire nuts all screwed in to make it work. It's like, oh my gosh, So.
Great. Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for your comment about Ukraine. So, Don Bueller, can you tell us the difference on O-rings? Do most outlets sell the better type? I have a TD. You have to ask. Viton is what you're after. So, where do you need O-rings in a TD?
Well, John, what I was thinking of, you started out with, replacing all the old rings in the SU carbs. Is that what you should do with a 52?
There's the only thing on the 52 are the needles and seats, because there aren't any O-rings. Everything's some sort of phenolic or fabric or plastic washer or brass washer or something or other. And then you got the cork seals, and cork works just fine with modern.
What about around the float bowl?
The float bowls should be attached solidly with washers, but if someone's put them on rubber gaskets, then the modern ones that you buy, certainly if you go to Joe Curto in Queens, New York, it's joecurto.com. He's got the proper ones, and I just can't help but think that everybody else who's selling the rubber grommets that support the float bowl for later ones with all the MGAs, although sometimes they're retrofitted to the T-types. Everybody's selling Viton ones. I'm sure they are.
Hey, thank you, John.
You're very, very welcome. Yep, Pat G. Old SUs used to say use bicycle oil on the top of the carb dampers, but those didn't even have dampers. The pistons weighed so much.
You're right, John. That was only on cars that had the brass pistons.
Yep.
Now that I think about it, pre-war stuff.
So Bob has said, and we've been going so fast here. I try to let everybody know. Go to my website, universitymotorsltd.com. That's where I've got information about this and that and everything. And there's also there on my website a little yellow PayPal button that says "Help John afford his retirement" or something catchy like that. And you can press that PayPal button and give me $1 or $1,000 or whatever figure in between is handy. So thank you very, very much. Rodolfo, if anyone wants to take a look at the Mexican Monterey event, Rodolfo's over in the chat section. Monterey, easy for me to say, Monterey Car Weekend MX.mx. So, and Mr. Connect has got New Jersey Center MG Car Club Britfest Saturday, May 7th. So there's all there's all kinds of stuff. All I have to do is get on Google and look for what British car show near me, like, Starbucks near me, something will come up. So let's see, Mr. Cunningham, when I got my 75 midget, someone had put a household light switch for the ignition switch hanging down under the dash. Hey, necessity is the mother of invention. And yeah, you just see all kinds of stuff. It's amazing, but it's nice to get the cars back to original. I like them to look original, which is why we went through all that stuff about the fuel filters on the T-types, because you open up the bonnet and somebody's there. Well, that shouldn't be there. It's like, well, dude, no, it shouldn't be there. But you know what? I want to get home. So that's why it's there. So, and there's always ways to get out of that stuff too. Anyway, we're down to the end of our questions. And thank you very, very kindly, everyone, for coming on tonight. It's 9:13. We've run a little bit over. Hit that PayPal button when you think of it. And if you've got a question, that we didn't address tonight or not now, if you're not sure, you're too embarrassed to ask, whatever, call me tomorrow. And I'll be happy I'll be up at the shop. I think afternoon, I'll be up at the shop tomorrow afternoon. And I've got an iPhone. And I mean, they're wonderful, and we can FaceTime if you've got an iPhone. I just did that with a guy today because he had must have been a midget 1500 because the distributor was on the left side, and he said, it just runs great and then it kills. And I said, what kind of distributor are you have in there? He says, well, I think it's original. I said, it can't be. All the original distributors are dead. They don't work. And he had an original distributor in there that every now and then would work. But it was handy because we had the iPhone and I could actually take a look at it rather than trying to describe it. Anyway, thank you all very much. We can unmute now, and anyone who wants to say anything can. Ron Nugent, I see you. Thanks for being here from Pasadena. And Judd, thanks for being here. You're always here. And
thanks, John.
Yep. And Ruth, nice to see you.
It's always a pleasure.
I didn't hear from. I don't know. I didn't see that Norm Ewing got on. I don't see him anywhere on here. So maybe their power shedding didn't work right again, or something.
John,
yeah.
John, what's your contact info?
My telephone number, that's the easiest, is 616-307. 6737, 616-307-6737. And then if anybody wants to email me for anything, I offer the windscreen information or anything else that I might have. My email address is real easy. Well, I say it's real easy. I know what it is. It's my name, John Twist, JOHNTWIST, at universitymotorsltd.com. And all of this is available on my website, which is universitymotorsltd.com. So,
thank you, Tom, for everything.
Hey, Mark, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, John.
All right. See you later.
John, a while back, I called you regarding an LED issue I had with an electronic flasher.
Yeah.
You had suggested throwing a distributor capacitor across the input to the electronic flasher. Well, that made the signal lights stop flashing at a horrendous rate, but they still weren't flashing at a consistent rate. Resistor plugs did the trick.
Oh, yeah. Are you using a like an EL12 or an EL13 from Napa?
No, I was using Champion RL82C. They're replacements for the 811 Champion plug.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. We're talking cross. All right. Okay. Well, good.
Yeah, and thank you for the lead. I appreciate it. We finally got down that road.
Okay. Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. And
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
if you can make it up to Minneapolis, the end of the month, that should be fun up there.
Oh.
Mark's shop is only about 4 blocks from where all the riots were 2 years ago. It's calmed down now. And anyway, that's lots of fun. He's been in the trade as long as I have. He bought his TC from a diplomat in Singapore. Is that right? I think Singapore, and then shipped it home, and then started working in his backyard on other people's MGs. And here he is. He's a couple years older than I am, but he's been in the trade just as long. So lots of fun. I called on Glenn Hard. I guess I said that probably. Glenn's MG service in St. Petersburg. Called on him a couple months ago, and he's a whole lot better than he was. He's in pretty tough shape. He said, not only did I get a valve job in my heart, but I got a new valve seat.
Hey, John, on your website, the date for the Altoona show, is that still the right date?
I haven't updated any of the stuff. No, I should. I'm reminded. I use my daughter to do all my stuff on my website, and she's uber busy now. She's got two part-time jobs that are kind of full-time jobs. So anyway, yeah, I got to get that updated.
Yeah, I can't get on their website. It won't come up.
Okay, all right. Jim was going to come on tonight, but you can send him a note, mgnut@atlanticbb.net or something. Jim Pastor, just send him an email. That was in the email that I sent out this morning.
Okay.
Okay.
John?
Thanks, John.
John, how is your daughter's GT?
About the Dillard show, Dillard, Georgia in the fall.
When is that, David?
It's in October, I think, or September. Dillard, I don't know. I didn't know if anybody from South Carolina or the Atlanta club would be on right now.
Looks like Judd's already signed off. But geez, you ought to be able to find out something from there by Googling it or something. So I don't know. I know it's an annual event.
Every 2 years, I think. But anyway,
all right, that's how much I know about it.
But the first 2 years ago I signed up, but I had to join the club to be able to register, which was strange. But that's just the way their website was set up. So anyway,
sometimes it's insurance. So don't we can't get anything by those insurance guys. So anyway, and Ron Nugent, you started to ask about my daughter's car. She drives it on an occasional weekend. I just talked to her today, but I didn't have a chance. I butt dialed her at 6:56, and she answered, and it said, "Oh, I'm talking to my other daughter and her husband, and we'll put you on a 3-way or 4-way." And I said, "Well, I can only talk 2 minutes. I got to start my Zoom session." So I didn't have a chance to ask her if she drove it this weekend, but she usually does on the weekend. So,
is she still working in Eagle Rock?
Yes. It Vidiots, VIDIOTS. That's one of her 2 jobs. It's 501c3, and they're getting this theater all set so they can show movies locally. They can do openings, and I think they want to rent. Because there used to be a chain out there called Vidiots or something that collapsed, with all the rest of them, like Blockbuster and everything. And they like 150,000 titles or something or other that they have stored away that they want to bring out and make available. So.
Okay, good.
Okie doke. And she's hammering on me to come out, of course, to visit her. So when I do, I'll let you know and scoot down the road there to Pasadena. So
yeah, I'm in Paso Robles right now, but we'll be down there.
Okie doke.
Yeah. Good night.
All right. Good night, everybody.
All right.
Good night.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
See you guys. Greeting from Mexico. Hasta luego.
Hey, okay, Rodolfo. Good luck at the show.
Thank you.
Adios.
Adios.